하실 수가 있습니다.
Right where you stand, your playground begins. DIDIM, the AR digital fitness platform. Today's health hero makes its entrance. Equipped it with 3D LiDAR sensing, the world's first all-in-one digital workout system that turns the floor into your stage. For youth, growth training. For adults, strength and stamina. For seniors, dementia prevention. One solution for every generation. DIDIM. Unite the world with real-time streaming rankings. With over 100 digital fitness programs at your fingertips. DIDIM.
X-Body Checker is the world's first and #1 system to check musculoskeletal system.
So what are the special aspects of X-Body?
We use infrared camera, which it detects the depths. It automatically detects all the human movements, and it analyzes their muscle condition by our algorithm. This device is approved by CEMDR, which stands for European Community Medical Device Regulations.
Still relying on the eye test for your body? Think again. Now it's time for X-Body with accurate data, precise results. The unrivaled #1 in musculoskeletal diagnostic devices. Know your body, win every battle. Break free from hidden pains that have been troubling you. A one-stop solution from measurement to treatment. The one and only way to scan your body with precision. X-Body.
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
Introducing Korean broadcast content that you won't be able to stop watching. For weary modern souls, Dr. Romantic, the quirky genius doctor of Puldam Hospital, prescribes heartwarming tales of humanity. A couple together for 7 years sees their rose-tinted glasses shatter. Can they keep their relationship alive? Discover the raw stories of youth, work, and love. Beyond what social media can show, experience the vibrant Korea through its hidden gems. Mama, the ultimate K-pop festival for global fans. Find your star in a feast of trendy music and electrifying performances. Now, the whole world enjoys it together.
knock. The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Pony Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pinkfong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like a total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
It's been a year since former President Yoon Suk-yeol briefly imposed martial law on December 3, 2024. President Lee Jae-myung delivered a statement this morning and honored the Korean people for turning what he described as an extreme moment of national crisis into peace through unity. The Nat'l Assembly has approved a national budget of around 727 trillion Korean won, or around $498 billion for 2026, putting an end to weeks of tense negotiations between rival parties. This marked the first time in 5 years that lawmakers have approved an annual budget bill within the legal deadline. A Seoul court has rejected an arrest warrant request for People Power Party lawmaker Kyung-ho after special prosecutors alleged that he, as the floor leader for the party on the night of the martial law, colluded with former President Yoon to prevent lawmakers from voting against the order. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. We begin today at the presidential office, where President Lee Jae-myung delivered a statement marking 1 year since former President Yoon Suk-yeol's declaration of martial law. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin joins us live for more. Yoo-jin, what stood out in President Lee's speech?
Right. Good afternoon, Eun-ji. So President Lee's 10-minute speech titled First Anniversary of the Revolution of Light centered on honoring the public for turning what he described a moment of extreme national crisis into peace through unity and nonviolence. First, take a listen.
국회로 향하는 장갑차를 맨몸으로 막고 의회를 봉쇄한 경찰에게 항의하고 국회의원들이 헌법상 의무를 이행할 수 있도록 국회 담장을 넘을 수 있게 도와주었습니다. 국민들께서는 폭력이 아니라 춤과 노래로 불법 친위 쿠데타가 촉발한 최악의 순간을 최고의 순간으로 바꿨습니다.
Now, as you know, Eun-ji, the demonstrations calling for the impeachment of former President Yoon drew great global attention, with crowds waving K-pop light sticks and K-pop songs. And what especially stood out in President Lee's speech today was his remarks that the Korean people deserve the Nobel Peace Prize for overcoming a democratic crisis without violence, adding that he hopes serious discussions on the idea can take place. He also announced that the government plans to designate December 3rd as an official public holiday so that the public can remember and reaffirm its meaning. Finally, the president stressed that the revolution of light is not over, vowing to ensure strict accountability for those involved in the martial law declaration and to prevent something similar from happening again.
Right, and Yoo-jin, after delivering his statement, President Lee also held a press conference with international journalists. What were the key takeaways?
You're right. So the first question, President Lee was asked about the rising tensions between China and Japan. Now, to that question, the president answered that taking sides would only make things worse. Here's what the president said.
한쪽 편을 들기보다는 모두가 함께 공존할 수 있는 길이 무엇인지를 찾도록 하고 또 가능한 영역이 있다면 우리로서도 갈등을 최소화하고 중재 조정할 수 있는 부분이 있다면 그 부분의 역할을 하는 게 더 바람직하겠다 이렇게 생각합니다.
He also said he is willing to visit both China and Japan soon to hold talks with President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi to further strengthen bilateral cooperation with each country. Now, several questions centered on President Yi's summits with U.S. President Donald Trump, particularly Washington's decision to give Seoul the green light to build nuclear power submarines. President Yi called it the most significant achievement, saying the decision will enhance Seoul's strategic flexibility and autonomy in the Northeast Asia region. At the same time, he again dismissed concerns that pursuing such subs could undermine the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, emphasizing that South Korea remains committed to nuclear non-proliferation and that developing nuclear weapons would, in fact, contradict Seoul's goal of a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. Eunji.
All right, that was our presidential office correspondent, Song Yujin. Now, over at the National Assembly, a series of events are being held to mark 1 year since the declaration of martial law. We go live to our political correspondent, Moon Hye-ryun, standing by to tell us more. It's good to see you, Hye-ryun. What's happening there today?
It's good to hear from you, Eunji. It's still somewhat early on in the day, but we're slowly beginning to see more and more people trickling in to take a look at the display behind me. But hopefully we'll see more and more people coming in throughout the day because it's a busy and symbolic day here at the National Assembly. And what you're looking at right now is a photo exhibition showcasing various scenes from around the National Assembly during last year's martial law declaration. These photos show the response of people and lawmakers during the hours under which martial law was declared. People rallying against the martial law troops and vehicles, and the historic moment in which the National Assembly convened a plenary session and passed a resolution calling for the lifting of martial law with unanimous approval from all 190 lawmakers present. A guided tour of key locations across the parliamentary compound will also take place throughout the week, with National Assembly Speaker Woo Won-sik personally leading the first tour. The route includes the spot where the speaker climbed over a fence to access the building, the second floor entrance where lawmakers faced off with martial law troops, and the grounds where military helicopters landed. These so-called dark tours will take place until Friday, and each of these significant sites has been marked with specially installed exhibits. A large rally organized by civic groups is also scheduled for around 7 p.m. outside the assembly to mark the anniversary. Members of the ruling Democratic Party and other liberal parties are also expected to join, alongside President Lee Jae-myung himself. Now, it's highly unusual for a sitting president to attend a civic group-led rally, and it's being interpreted as an effort to underscore the public's role in overcoming last year's crisis and to highlight the administration's governing philosophy of popular sovereignty. And starting at 9 p.m., a media facade projection outside the exterior walls of the National Assembly will also take place for around 20 minutes. That's all I have for now, but I'll be back in a later newscast to tell you more about what's happening around the National Assembly. So back to you, Eunji.
All right, thank you for the report, Hye, and do keep us updated. Now, in the months following the night of martial law, Korea's diplomatic capacity was restrained due to uncertainty over Yoon's impeachment. However, the past year has shown Korea's democratic and diplomatic resilience, according to one international observer. Our Oh Soo-young reports.
A year after the martial law crisis unsettled South Koreans and foreign observers, the country's diplomatic standing has been restored by democratic resilience and top-level diplomacy. That's according to former EU ambassador to South Korea, Michael Reiterer, who was in Seoul on the night the December 3rd decree was declared. He recalls the disbelief that swept through diplomatic circles as events unfolded.
I think I shared probably at the beginning the feeling with the international community that cannot be. This is not true. That was also the reaction of some Koreans around me at that evening.
Initial shock quickly evolved into deeper evaluation of what the crisis revealed. He cited warning signs within the previous administration and long-standing vulnerabilities in Korea's political architecture.
If you look at this night, probably without civil society and with parliamentarians jumping over the fence and a military not really engaging, the whole thing could have turned completely different. So how is it possible that this declaration could have happened?
Korea's democratic resilience, he noted, has long rested on the strength of its civic mobilization, which he observed over 2 presidential impeachment crises.
Well, I think the Korean history is actually a very strong argument because the engagement of civil society in Korea is probably stronger than in other countries. I mean, I've seen it with my own eyes. 2017, I have seen it. I have seen it last year when I was in Korea and when I saw demonstrations against President Yoon at the time. So I think the pressure from the street is a corrective.
But he warned that relying on the public alone to prevent such crises is insufficient. Reiter pointed to renewed discussions on constitutional reform to prevent a deadlock between the president and the executive.
And I think the lesson to be learned is that there should be something done about the presidential term, and perhaps also to make sure that the parliament and the president somehow are elected in parallel. Because one of the reasons for this coup efforts were the frustration that the president was blocked by the parliament.
Still, he noted that the world now sees Korea as having passed a significant stress test. At a time when Seoul is seeking a greater role in global affairs, from supply chain resilience to outreach to the global south, its swift return to high-level diplomacy after the crisis helped restore confidence abroad.
The international community, I think, has accepted now that Korea is back and back on track. We have seen that President Lee could host the APEC summit. He traveled to the United States. He stopped over in Tokyo. I think there is now a sound basis. And you also have a foreign minister now, Cho Yoon, who has a long experience as a diplomat, and I think he can certainly make sure that the ship remains on course, even if there are some waves on the ocean.
With Korea seeking greater influence from G7 level engagement to semiconductor supply chain leadership, Reiter stresses that foreign policy cannot be separated from internal cohesion.
So the country has to unite and stay together because there are big challenges to meet. And if foreign policy starts at home, then you have to be consolidated at home. And I think, therefore, Korea would have an interest to have a more cooperative domestic environment in order to be stronger internationally.
1 year on, Korea's partners believe the country's democratic foundations remain intact, but its foreign policy role will grow only as steadily as the institutions that support it. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The National Assembly has approved a budget of $498 billion for 2026. Lawmakers passed the plan just minutes before the legal deadline on Tuesday, putting an end to weeks of tense negotiations. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The National Assembly has approved next year's budget, totaling 727.9 trillion won, or about $498 billion. Lawmakers passed a plan just minutes before the legal deadline on Tuesday night, ending weeks of tense negotiations and delivering the first on-time budget in 5 years. The breakthrough came earlier in the day when the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party reached a last-minute compromise. Both sides agreed to maintain the government's proposed overall spending level, a key demand of the administration, and preserve several of President Lee Jae-myung's signature programs. Those programs include the nationwide local gift certificate initiative, which the opposition had previously argued should be scaled back. Under the final agreement, the parties decided to reduce $2.9 billion from a mix of artificial intelligence programs, policy funds, and several other categories. That money will not be cut from the budget entirely. Instead, the same amount will be reallocated to priority areas that both parties agreed require urgent support. Those areas include measures to strengthen the country's disaster recovery system following the massive fire at a state-operated data center earlier this year. The budget will also direct additional funding toward expanding the distributed power grid industry, which the government says will improve energy stability and technological competitiveness. National scholarships will also receive an increase to help families struggling with tuition costs during a period of slow economic recovery. In the end, both sides chose compromise over a continued stalemate. While keeping the overall spending level intact while adjusting internal allocations, the parties managed to meet the constitutional deadline for the first time since 2021. Lawmakers from both parties said the agreement was difficult but necessary to prevent funding disruptions for key public services. With the budget now approved, ministries will begin preparing detailed spending plans for 2026. The government says the new budget will prioritize economic support, national defense, and faster recovery from recent disasters while maintaining stability in state finances. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
A Seoul court has rejected an arrest warrant request on insurrection charges for People Power Party lawmaker Choo Kyung-ho. The Seoul Central District Court's warrant review panel on Wednesday dismissed the request after special prosecutors alleged Choo, who was then the floor leader for PPP on the night of the martial law declaration, colluded with Yoon to prevent lawmakers from voting against the order. The presiding judge said that the case involves legal and factual disputes that should be settled through full courtroom arguments rather than pretrial detention. The court also noted Choo's consistent attendance, the progress already made in the investigation, and the lack of any real flight or evidence destruction risk. Now, in other news, the U.S. Commerce Secretary says part of South Korea's committed investment under the bilateral tariff deal will be directed toward building nuclear power plants in the United States. Speaking at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Howard Lutnick indicated that a portion of the $750 billion pledged by Japan and South Korea would be directed toward U.S. nuclear power projects. He added that the United States needs a nuclear arsenal of generation of power. Meanwhile, the World Conference on Doping in Sport is taking place in Busan this week, drawing global attention as leaders discuss new worldwide anti-doping standards. The IOC president also highlighted Korea's role. Our culture correspondent Park Gun-woo has more from Busan.
Everybody's a winner when competition is fair. But one of the biggest obstacles to achieving fairness in sport is doping. That's why countries from around the world have gathered once again to discuss ways to eradicate doping in sports, this year in Busan, Korea's southern port city, through Friday. Busan is the first Asian city to host a World Conference on Doping in Sport, held every 6 years to set new global standards. As the event is so infrequent, it has drawn much attention, bringing delegates from far and near. Ghana's sports minister stressed the importance of collaborating with Korea, a country known for its strong stance against doping.
You have invested quite heavily in matters of anti-doping. You have spoken out boldly. The genetic make of our athletes may be different, but it is important we share information and see how best we can collaborate so that at the world level, we will not be cheated. We have to meet and have a conversation. So the long journey was worth it.
And it's not just Ghana. Around 2,000 participants from over 190 countries are here for the 2025 edition. For the next few days, they'll be rolling up their sleeves to keep global sports clean and fair, shaping international standards for the next 6 years from 2027. The Olympics is one of the major events guided by these standards, prompting key sports figures, including the IOC president, to highlight Korea's role.
The most ideal is to have no doping. right? And we can only do that together if we're working together as one to ensure that each of us plays our roles. And Korea has been a really good partner for the Olympic movement, and most recently in the past few years with hosting the Winter Games. And I'm sure they will continue to be a really solid partner for us and help unify the one team.
And World Anti-Doping Agency officials noted that one of the highlights of the Korean conference's code revision will be focusing on stronger protection for minor athletes and support for anti-doping organizations, ensuring operational independence. With that in mind, the revised WADA code and related standards will be announced as part of the Busan Declaration on December 5th, once again spotlighting Busan as the starting point for strengthening fairness in global sports. 박건우, Arirang News, Busan.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Moscow on Tuesday, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Trump advisor Jared Kushner had a 5-hour meeting with President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin as Washington pushes a revised Ukraine peace plan. Putin's advisors Kirill Dmitriev and Yuri Ushakov called the talks productive, constructive, and substantive, but confirmed there is, quote, no compromise yet, especially on territory, which remains the central sticking point. Ushakov said Russia reviewed the updated 28-point plan along with 4 additional documents and that parts of the U.S. proposal are acceptable while others are not. Putin earlier accused European governments of trying to block the U.S. draft, saying their demands were, quote, not acceptable for Russia. Meanwhile, in Ireland, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky said, now more than ever, there is a chance to end this war, but stressed that several issues, quote, still need to be worked out. In Honduras on Tuesday, the presidential race tightened dramatically as centrist candidate Salvador Nasralla took a razor-thin lead over conservative rival and Nationalist Party leader Nat'l Assembly, who is backed by U.S. President Donald Trump. The tally at 2:30 p.m. local time showed Nasralla at 39.96% and Asfuda at 39.80%, with just over 60% of votes counted after a system failure left about 20% uncounted. Earlier, the Electoral Authority urged calm, saying the rapid count platform and its website had crashed, forcing parts of the vote to be counted by hand. Observers reported high turnout and largely peaceful voting, but warned that prolonged delays could trigger protests or unrest. Trump had taken to social media on Monday and alleged fraud, warning there would be, quote, hell to pay if results were changed. He also appealed to Hondurans to vote for Asfuda, adding he would pardon former conservative President Juan Orlando Hernandez. The White House said Hernandez, who was serving 45 years for drug trafficking, has since been pardoned and released. In the U.S. on Tuesday, President Donald Trump said the United States will begin striking targets inside Venezuela soon, escalating a campaign that has so far focused on hitting alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. Trump also warned that any country trafficking drugs into the U.S. is subject to attack, prompting a sharp response from Colombia's President Gustavo Petro, who said threatening Colombia's sovereignty is declaring war. At the same meeting, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said strikes on suspected drug vessels have only just begun. In London on Tuesday, Fabergé's imperial winter egg, commissioned in 1913 by Tsar Nicholas II, has sold at auction for a record $30 million. Christie's says the diamond-studded piece, one of only 7 still in private hands, is now the most expensive Fabergé's work ever sold, surpassing the previous record set in 2007. Choo Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
A powerful cold wave is gripping the entire country, with cold wave advisories in place across much of the central region and northern Gyeongsang-Bukdo province. And these areas will stay sub-zero all day today. Meanwhile, areas of the west coast could see up to 10 centimeters of snow piling up through tomorrow, with heavy snow advisories issued for parts of Jeollado and mountainous areas of Jeju Island. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to -3, but before that, making matters worse are windy conditions. Wind advisories are in place for the west coast and the east coast, with a dry advisory in place for east coast regions. And this afternoon, Seoul gets up to -3 degrees, Chuncheon topping out at -1 under sunny skies in most parts of Korea. And this intense cold wave hold on through the end of the week, but temperatures will return to above season norms this weekend.
Now that's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.